Thanks for joining this webinar. We'll start with an introduction on conception now, and introduce myself first, of course. My name is Marjolein Willemen. I work in the medical policy team at Novartis in Basel, and in this role I'm co-leading IMI ConcePTION together with Miriam Sturkenboom from Utrecht Medical Center in Utrecht. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. And just before we kick off, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We are monitoring that and answer your questions at the end of the presentation or connect you to the right experts that can connect with you afterwards to help you further. So IMI ConcePTION is a 5-year plus project. It's looking at the effect of medicines on pregnant and breastfeeding women and the outcomes for their babies. The whole project actually started with this very simple question on the slide here, which almost every pregnant woman and certainly every healthcare professional comes across. Can I safely use this medicine now I'm pregnant? Or is it safe to prescribe this medicine to my pregnant patient? And unfortunately, how easy the question also may sound, there's no easy answer to it. And there's not an easy source or a Google search that you can just do to help you to find this information, especially because I think it's critical for this type of questions that the information is evidence-based and comes from a reliable and trustworthy source in that regard. And that brings me to the next slide, where we have an example of a real case from a woman, we called her Amelia, who is suffering from severe nausea in her early pregnancy. She has been using an antiemetic that is known to be safe for use during pregnancy, but her condition is actually worsening, and therefore she and her physician are exploring other options, actually in order to prevent an hospitalization. Her physician is now considering to prescribe ondansetron, which is a more powerful antiemetic, but also recommends actually against the use in early pregnancy in the package insert. So what are now the options for Amelia? And where can she and her healthcare professional find this information that is robust, reliable, and evidence-based? Next slide, please. And these are exactly the questions that led to conception, because we believe that every woman has the right to safe and effective use of medicines during the pregnancy or during lactation, and it should be based on good evidence. And in nowadays world, with the emphasis on inclusivity and leaving no one behind, you really clearly see the relevance of this type of questions. And we know, of course, that during drug development, the emphasis is not on pregnant women. There's, of course, preclinical work done, but not all the animal studies are fully predictive of what is going to happen to women and their babies. And in general, clinical research, phase 1 to 3 studies, pregnant women are usually, I would say, almost always excluded, unless, of course, it's a treatment that is specific for pregnant women, such as investigating drugs for preeclampsia or something like that. And that means that most of the information that we get comes from the post-approval stage, when the drug is out there on the market and women do take these medications. And now it's our job to make sure that this information is indeed systematically captured, it's analyzed and used to generate robust evidence on the safety of those medicines during the pregnancy and lactation period. And if we can go to the next slide. There are a lot of numbers here, but no worries, I'll talk you through. So I think 5 million pregnant people in Europe every year. On a global scale, of course, the number is much higher even. And I think we can truly say that almost every woman, so 90%, uses medication during some point during their pregnancy or breastfeeding. And we also know that on average, a woman takes about 1.6 different medications throughout their pregnancy. And of course, I think it's clear that most women will wish to avoid medication use during their pregnancy, but we also need to acknowledge that it's simply not always possible. Some women have chronic diseases, such as multiple sclerosis, diabetes, epilepsy, where they could get seriously ill if they discontinue their treatment. Or stopping could even have a negative effect on their unborn child. And of course, women have also acute illnesses, such as infections or severe headache that needs to be treated. And as you can see on the right upper side of this slide, those numbers indicate that proper evidence about medicine safety is lacking. And if you look at the evidence, and we come back to that in a minute, it's also very inconsistent. That means that there is a huge burden of uncertainty, both among the women and their treating physicians and the healthcare professionals that are working with them. So you can see here that's more than 70% of the medicines that are centrally authorized in the European Union, there is no information available on the use of that medicine in a pregnancy. And the number is even higher if you look at breastfeeding, going over 80%. And there's only 3.7% of the medicines that have an explicit statement in their labeling saying that it's safe to use it during a pregnancy or lactation. So that number is really very low. And now I move to the last part of this slide, which is the lower right corner. And these numbers are actually based on one of the first studies we did when conception started, was to look at the available evidence across Europe. And nowadays everybody goes online, so that's what we did as well. And I personally find these numbers really shocking, still find them shocking, because it shows that in more than half of the cases, so more than in 52% of the cases, the information about the safety of medicines during a pregnancy was inconsistent between different sources. And the number is not on the slide, but for lactation it was even higher. And that means that it is highly dependent on where you are looking and what source of information you are using. And that can lead to totally different information. One source saying, oh, it's fine, and please go ahead taking this drug when you're pregnant, to another source maybe saying, oh no, this drug is putting your unborn child at very high risk, don't do it. And I think this inconsistency really indicates that there is a need for much better information for women and healthcare professionals, and also that this information needs to be consistent throughout and needs to be based on proper evidence. And that brings me to the conception project itself on the next slide. I can move one more. Thank you. Because what is IMI ConcePTION? It's IMI ConcePTION, so Innovative Medicines Initiative. We started in 2019 and we were supposed to end in March this year, but we have got an extension until the end of the year, the end of 2024. The project is co-led by Novartis and the UMC Utrecht and is funded by the European Union. We have the pharmaceutical industry also substantially contributing, not in the form of funds, but providing resources in terms of people and data. So at the moment, we have more than 200 people working on the project from more than 80 different organizations, which includes, for example, the European Medicines Agency, pharmaceutical companies, academia, public health organizations, and also people from the teratology networks in Europe as well. We are spread throughout Europe and also have some involvement of countries outside of Europe and outside of the EU as well. Next slide, please. And if you then look at conception itself, it's very clear that it is our goal and our mission to build a very trustworthy ecosystem, which Miriam is going to describe in a little bit more detail in a minute, which builds on the two pillars that I have just described. First, generating evidence-based information, monitoring the data that are out there, and ensuring that the information that we have is accurate, scientifically sound and robust. The second pillar is making that information available to the public, to the patients, to healthcare professionals, and everybody who is looking for information on medication use in a pregnancy and during lactation. Next slide, please. I think we can skip this one and go to the next, please. Yeah, and I think what one of the big learnings over the last 4 years has been is that if we combine forces and if we collaborate across the different parties that are involved, from academia, regulators, pharma, to teratology centers and healthcare professionals, we are able to make big steps, and we have made big steps within conception in developing such an ecosystem, and also in developing the best methodologies on how to generate evidence-based safety information on medicines that are used in pregnancy and lactation. and also how to bring this information to the public, to the pregnant women, and to the healthcare professionals in their daily clinical practices. And this is also where I would like to hand over to Miriam, and she will give you some more insights on how our conception ecosystem looks like.
Thank you very much, Marjolein. So maybe the next slide. So as Marjolein was stating, within the IMI conception project, our work has been focusing on two key areas. First of all, building that ecosystem. And we really think that we should not state that there is no information, because actually we should utilize the data that is being generated in healthcare and also complement that with primary data collection. But we need to look at the data that is available to learn and to provide best evidence. So we have been building a system to establish and validate methods that use this existing data and new data collection about the use of and the effects of medicines in pregnancy and also during lactation. Then there is this whole ecosystem that creates evidence, and then there is also this second key area, which is really about dissemination and summarizing all the evidence that is available in a valid manner, in a consistent manner. So this is done through the MUMS knowledge bank, which actually guides and advises those that need information, so the parents or healthcare professional, with consistent information that's been made together with a lot of parties that are involved. Next slide. So in order to, if we look at that first area, the key area, that's the generators of evidence, we actually distinguish three study networks. So first, the conception primary data collection. This is a network that collects information from women that are, or people that are exposed during pregnancy to a certain medicine or vaccine, and then follow them up over time during pregnancy and after pregnancy in the neonates, to actually learn also about immediate effects and about long-term effects, and we'll talk about that more. Then there is the conception electronic health record network. This utilizes actually data that is generated and captured, like real-world data, in the routine care system. So if people go to their general practitioner or to any healthcare professional, data are being recorded, and these data can actually be used in a pseudonymized manner to learn with all the proper safeguards and privacy regulations. And so this can be utilized as well. And then we have a third network, which is the lactation network. And this actually looks at the transfer of medicines into milk. And this is led by the University of Bern, Leuven, and Oslo. And we'll dive in each of those a bit deeper. Next slide. So the primary data collection, I think the key project there is the lifetime system, which enrolls women when they are pregnant and then follows through birth, but also then the neonate after birth at 6, 12, 24 months, 4 years, and 7 years. During pregnancy, the common data elements are being collected, and then after birth, the ages and stages questionnaire is utilized, and at 7 years, again, the lifetime questionnaire. So this is a systematic assessment of those pregnancies that are exposed to certain medicines by really actively enrolling the pregnant person. Next slide. Then there is the second stream on the electronic health record data. And so here you see a graphic on the bottom. This is like what we call a pipeline. Now the pipeline is modularized. As you can see it, we divide green areas and gray areas. The green areas in the pipeline are data sets. And then the gray areas are data transformation steps. And then on top and below, we have supportive documentation and expertise. So that's more what is needed in the context to use this pipeline. So people and expertise, as well as tools to capture which data is being utilized, as well as protocols and statistical analysis plans. So if we go through this pipeline, on the left-hand side, we realize that for electronic health record data is available in many different places across Europe. And actually, it can be used for secondary purposes, but it's all in its original and local format. So that's what we call native data model. It's just the structure is all different, meaning different table names and different variable names. So the first thing that we need to do when we actually want to work together, which is what we want, is that we structure the data into a common structure. And that is what we call a common data model. And ConcePTION has developed this common data model for electronic health record data. So it's just a definition of how the tables and variables should be named. Now, then when you put everything in the same format, it doesn't mean it's the same, actually. So the content can still be different, meaning, for example, in the UK, diagnoses are being coded with a read code in the past, now maybe SNOMED. In the northern countries, they use ICD-10. In southern countries like Italy, they still use ICD-9. In the Netherlands, diagnoses are being coded in general practice with ICPC. So we have a lot of different vocabularies that are being utilized. And now all these diagnostic codes are in the same format, but it doesn't mean that we are talking about the same thing. So T2 is the step where we try to harmonize the languages, and we do that as part of the script. Then we create study variables, we apply a design in the T3, then we create analytical data sets where an analysis is being done. All of that is done by sending a script to the data, not the data to the script, by the script to the data in a distributed manner. And then only results are being pulled on a research environment and can be reported. So these tools have been developed as part of the ecosystem. People have been trained, and this is all operational and even adopted by other networks such as VAC4EU, the EU Pharmacoepidemiology and Pharmacovigilance Research Network, and the Sigma Consortium. Next slide. Then the third key area, the network, is about lactation. And here a lot of development has happened. When we started and wrote the project, actually very little was available in Europe in terms of expertise to do lactation studies. So we have built a lot during the project. And it started looking at in vitro work using memory epithelial cells to look at transfer of medicines in milk, potentially. Then animal studies, porcine models, and then human lactation studies where women that are lactating were asked to donate milk in a biobank, and that was actually analyzed and then modeled for transfer. We'll talk about that more later. Next slide. So this is about the generators of information. Then we have those that are disseminating information, because in a proper learning health system, you should have the evidence generation, but also the dissemination. And in ConcePTION, this is called the MUMPS Knowledge Bank. It's Mothers Using Medicine Safely abbreviation. And this is a free-to-use open knowledge bank that can actually be searched on internet or your phone about drug use during pregnancy and lactation. Now, what is really the contribution of, I think, of the project is that many TIS sites, so the Teratology Information Services in Europe, were doing this in their local environment, but now we have developed a process where everybody is actually using a standard process to assess evidence that is out there and transforming that into a knowledge-based page. Our initial prototype of the MUMPS Knowledge Bank includes information on 40 drugs, and we, of course, intend to extend this to over 200 if there is future funding. Next slide. Also, what has been developed is an e-learning tool for healthcare professionals, and this is an online training resource about teratology and medication use in pregnancies that can actually be seen by healthcare professionals. It's also free to access and could become part of medical education. And if people would like to have access to this, please contact Brian Cleary. Next slide. So why we develop MUMS, and here you on the right-hand side, you see a screenshot. Here you see two different drugs and then an indication rheumatoid arthritis, and you can actually search those pages and look at the information that has been provided there. So we really try to become the primary pan-European source of information on the safety of medicines, and this is actually to address what Marjolein was saying, that currently there is information on internet, but it's contradicting and people don't know anymore what to rely on. So we want to become this recognized, reliable knowledge bank. Next slide. So as we heard before, the project started in 2019, it ends in December. A lot has been performed, many deliverables, many papers written, and a lot of tools tested. But we are building our future structure, where we actually want to champion the fact that we need a robust and reliable data and evidence on the safe use of medicines during pregnancy and lactation. So we have proven that this is possible, but we cannot only prove that we can generate information. We need also to advocate that actually this problem can be addressed, the knowledge gap can actually be addressed, but we do need a structured way of generating the evidence and policies that actually make this happen. So we are looking into what happened actually in establishing the Pediatric Investigation Plan, the PIP in the past, where for children actually, which was also like a neglected population somehow, and now there is a lot of evidence being generated, and we could even think about a pregnancy investigation plan potentially. So we are advocating that this evidence gap is being filled. We want to galvanize our collective efforts of this very extensive collaboration and continue to further develop tools and platforms that are needed to both generate the evidence as well as disseminate this for the public good. Next slide. And I would like to thank you for listening to us and thank you for your interest.